Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining the Ghetto Film School's masterclass today. The class and short film challenge is presented by AT&T Water Media. Learn more about the film challenge at filmcredits.org. I'm Kia Freeman, also known as Kia FM TV on social media, and I'm an independent film producer. In addition, I facilitate a film educational program called Producing the Dream, which is a community partner of this program as well. I'll be your moderator for today. First, I want to thank everyone for joining us today and showing up, which means you are ready to invest in your career. You're in for a treat. We have a super special guest with us today, so get your pens and iPads out and get ready to take notes. Before I tell you about our guest, I do want to go over a few house rules. Number one, only log on with one device so that we don't get feedback from your second device. Number two, keep your devices on mute. And number three, if you're moving around in front of your camera, just put it so that you can turn your camera off and we don't get distracted by movement. Lastly, hold all your questions to the end. Now let's go ahead and get started. As I said, I'm super excited to introduce our masterclass instructor, Mr. Barry Cole. Barry Cole and his company, Spot Music, which was established in 2001, stand at the threshold of where media meets technology. Spot Music is an independent consultation and music supervision firm. Cole consults globally and maintains Spot Music to provide music supervision, publishing, and transmedia production services to the entertainment industry. With more than 80 credits, Cole has worked on television and film projects, including The Chi, Sling Blade, American Psycho, Super Troopers, Belly, which is one of my favorites, Brown Sugar, another favorite, Our Family Wedding, Drum Roll, Roll Bounce, Beautyshop and Notorious, just to name a few. Also, if you have time, he does have two current documentaries that are right now on Netflix. So take the time to check them out. It's Who Killed Malcolm X and Living with Yourself. Again, I'm excited to have Mr. Cole here with us today. I'm going to take notes myself as an independent film producer. It's so valuable to have someone like Mr. Cole sharing his knowledge and expertise with us. So Mr. Cole, I'd like to go ahead and just start off by asking you, how did you get involved with music in film?
Oh, thanks, Kia, and thanks for the great introduction. Well, I've always loved music. You know, it was something that I grew up listening to around, my family, and it was always around no matter what activity I was doing. My father, when I was young, was president of a nonprofit organization in Oakland called the Black Filmmakers Hall of Fame. And each year they would have an award ceremony. And it wasn't huge, but for the Black community at that point, and this is the early 80s, to have an award show, it was always so exciting. Like, I got to meet Clarence Muse, who a lot of people don't know, but he was, the older man in Car Wash. He was like a pioneer in Black film, and knowing that my roots go back that far, where I was shown an appreciation for the pioneers of Black film, Black filmmaking from an early age, really influenced, I think, the fact that I became a music supervisor later in life.
And that's so important, I think, for a lot of people, especially with the Ghetto Film School, connecting youth into their experiences allow them to now see what's available in the careers that are in film. I know in speaking to you, you kind of took a skill that you had as a young person and turned that into connecting and marrying the two worlds with film. Tell us what that skill was and how you were able to use that in film.
Well, I grew up, probably from the age of 14 or so, 13 or 14, started DJing. And I got my broadcast license from CalX in Berkeley, California, at UC Berkeley, when I was 14. And, when you're 14, you're not old enough to drive, and you're not old enough to drink, you're not old enough to vote. So they're having a license, to do something was very empowering. And I took it very seriously, being able to play music for people. So, I DJ'd school dances, I did whatever I could to play music for folks. And when I got to college, I would play music for, DJ at frat parties and different events on campus to make money. But I was also a program director and general manager of the radio station at school, which helped me continue to kind of delve into music. And the best part about the radio station was the fact that, pre-internet, and literally this was pre-internet, this was my music feed. Record labels would send music to the radio station to get played on the radio. So being able to get those first albums, coming out when they're coming out, and I was up in the middle of New Hampshire, so it was a bit isolated. So that was my social feed or my music feed back then. And I was also studying film at the time. So although I didn't really know that I could put the two together, or that I would put them together as I had, I continued to study film. I continued to DJ. And when I got to New York, my first job was working in the development department at 40 Acres and a Mule for Spike Lee. And I was given that job by an alum of my college who was running the development department at that time. So there wasn't a music department, at Spike's company at the time. He had a record label, but they weren't that active. So I got in based on the fact that I had studied film, and that meant I could come in and I could read scripts. And, that was kind of my foot in the door. And before I knew it, Spike had me doing everything from graphic design to parking his car. Because this was back before he had a license. Like, people would basically just drive him around. So, that was kind of my introduction. And Spike was nice enough to put me in the art department on the film Crooklyn, which was my first feature film credit. And I worked under, Wynn Thomas and Chris Shriver, and I got to watch them and help, in the making of that cul-de-sac where, the entire movie kind of took place, where the family home was. So that was really special. And I think because Spike had me doing graphic design, he thought I might be more artistically inclined. But when I wasn't working for Spike, because when I was interning before working on the movie, the only money I was making was DJing. So, my daytime job was in film, my nighttime job was in music. And it wasn't until after Crooklyn, when Spike was also nice enough to say, go forth and make something of yourself, basically, that I was able to get an internship with a company called the Shooting Gallery that were in pre-production on a film called New Jersey Drive, which coincidentally Spike was actually executive producing. And I was interning, literally interning, picking up laundry, getting coffee, walking dogs, stuff like that. And the director was frustrated because he was shooting this film about young carjackers in Newark, but he didn't have any music, to inspire him. So I used that same resource that I learned at the radio station to call the record labels and say, hey, what do you have for new releases? Send them here. So within a few days, like, a big stack of music had arrived, and I gave it to the director, and the producer looked at it, he's like, how much did that cost? And I was like, oh, it was free. These are new releases. And he looked at me and he said, you're the music supervisor.
Now that, like, the path of how you started is amazing, to go from, just your experience in film as a young person because of your dad, and then DJing, and then working your way into the opportunity and using your resources to bring music to New Jersey Drive. I mean, I think, it goes to show that it's about learning and understanding how you connect your network and your skills and bringing those pieces together, and they're so key in film. I do want to say one thing. Crooklyn is in my top 5 films. So now I will look at the credits and see your name there. I always use that as a reference as one of my top 5 films. So I'm kind of geeked over here that you worked on that film.
Hey, look in the fine print. Art department PA. Look,
okay, I'm gonna look. I'll take a screenshot of it. With that being said, you mentioned a lot of things. Working on the film with New Jersey Drive, you started at the level of pre-production. Now we can go into what the process is as a music supervisor. You were kind of thrown into it, and I know since then up to now you are, have lots of experience and expertise to talk about the process. But tell us a little bit about that process of how you get started with a film in pre-production to create the tone and mood of a film.
Well, it was, all things aligned for New Jersey Drive, because literally I had just gotten back from walking the director's dog, and he's like, oh, I need music because I'm shooting this film about these teenage carjackers in Newark, and there's going to be music, but I don't know what it is. And to me, I'm like, well, I just finished walking your dog. I'm about to go out and get your laundry. I'll make a call and get you some music. But to me, he had actually downloaded while he was in pre-production the mood and the tone of the music for his film. He could hear it, but he just didn't know what it was. And the director was probably in his 30s at that time, and he's making a film about 16-year-olds in Newark, New Jersey. So he's like, it's got to be real. It's got to be authentic. Like, how am I going to know what these kids are listening to right now? And for me, I was like, oh, that's easy. It's like, let me call up some folks and let me figure out who's around. And, oh, well, through DJing, it's like, I know these people. And, oh, this label's got a bunch of music. And, before I knew it, that in pre-production has become something that has become very crucial when a lot of films don't actually do it. For New Jersey Drive, because he mentioned it in passing, like it was very incidental that I would be able to call people and be able to give him what he needed, so much so that the producer would be like, you're the music supervisor, and I didn't know what that was. But it really is the first step. And I mean, the first step is listening, but the first step is really establishing what that mood and the tone of the overall project is. And in pre-production, if you can do that, if you have music that's written into your script, the song that somebody's going to sing, or the song that people are going to dance to, or something that someone's going to perform, all of those things need to be identified and cleared before you go into production. Because if you risk, shooting, a wedding reception song to Love and Happiness, and you're like, oh, well, they'll love it. It's just such a nice, scene, and it's family and they're dancing together. And then you find out the market rate for Love and Happiness is like $100,000. That's on you. That's not on them. So being able to strategize and have that foresight in pre-production is really important. And I've seen,
like you said, that's really on the producer to be aware of, that information up front, so that when they're doing their budget, they know how to budget the film properly.
Exactly. And I've seen, scripts, sometimes I'm brought in the script stage in pre-production or development, where they're like, okay, well, we don't know. We've got a bunch of music written in here. Tell us if it's possible. And, it's like, if you've got a Biggie Small song in there, if you've got like, Michael Jackson song in there, it's like, you already know there's an uphill battle. You already know these songs get hundreds of thousands of dollars. They get used in big commercials and television. It's like, these are already guarded songs. So if you're coming to me to tell you that you can have these songs for free, it's like, well, no, you can't. But if you're going to write, hundreds of thousands of dollars of music into your script, you just want to make sure that's the money that you have, and you're doing it very deliberately.
Right. And so I think key number one, as you just said, is bringing the music supervisor in during pre-production, especially if you're going to try to use licensed music, which leads me to the next question. Can you walk us through some of the misconceptions of licensing music, as well as just the process overall? I know you have a graphic that you want to share. I don't know if you want to bring that in now, or you let us know when you want to bring that up.
I can share it, but yeah, I can talk through some of the points. One thing I like to start with is kind of the myths and misconceptions. Oftentimes people say, well, I hear that I can use up to a certain amount of time for free without having to clear it. And I always ask those people to put themselves in the shoes of a songwriter, who's written a song, who's registered a song, who has a copyright, who makes their living off of these songs. So if everybody could just use 30 seconds of that song in a commercial or in a film or in a television show without paying them, that's not going to do well, for their revenue. So by putting yourself in the other person's position, I think you get a better understanding. Like if you're the songwriter, if you're the record label, and somebody wants to actually license a song from you, what is the process? So this particular graphic is what I call the oversimplified version. And it's not oversimplified because it's false. I mean, it's definitely true. But this is one place where I can talk about the difference between what we call production music or library music versus a popular song that you would be licensing or a commercial song. So production music is generally made by studios who will make different cues in different genres, and they'll make those all available at a flat rate. Most music libraries will license a song for $1,000. Some of them have 20, 30, 40,000 songs in their catalog. So at that point, when you have so many songs and they're available at such an easy clip by just being able to call up somebody and say, I want this song for $1,000, they've very much streamlined the process. The only thing about that process is it's not necessarily as detailed as it gets. This infographic is actually much more detailed and much more what the process is like in terms of workflow. Now, free music, as I said, you can't use a certain amount of time for a certain amount of seconds for free, you know, just because you want to. But free music can constitute songs that are in the public domain, and that will also require research. But when you are turning your deliverables over to a distributor, they are also going to require that you have paperwork to prove that the song that you're saying is in the public domain is in the public domain. And sometimes that can cost money to get, you know, a verification from an attorney or a copyright law firm that can give you a documentation saying there's no chain of title on this song. So even a public domain song that would be zero might cost $500 because you actually have to get paperwork, you know, to prove that it's in the public domain. The other type of music that can be considered, especially for documentaries, is fair use music. And fair use is when you would contract with an attorney to review scenes in your film and ask whether or not the music can be used based on fair use. Fair use is usually stipulating something where you're demonstrating something. So if you say, oh, it was this year and this song came out and we always used to go to the beach when that song played, we'd all get up and dance. There's something about the story that includes that song, and there are certain parameters that if they fall within, then it can constitute fair use. But once again, the decision to use the strategy for fair use means that you're reallocating your music budget to pay for a fair use attorney to verify that you don't have to clear the music. And, you know, they can guide you and tell you what you need to do to make the song fit fair use, but that may not fit what your intention of the song is for the scene. You know, if you're clearly using the song as score to score a scene, that's not going to be fair use. So the third kind of free music, which applies to the US, is public broadcasting. And it took me a very long time to learn this. Up until the past couple of years, I didn't realize that, you know, there's legislation for publicly broadcasted content. So PBS has specific guidelines for licensing music. If you are a PBS sanctioned or produced project, then you do not have to receive permission to use popular music. The rates are set at $44 per background use and $99 per featured use. Now, the guidelines for that is if it's a PBS project, it can air on PBS and PBS affiliated stations, and it can stream on pbs.org. But once you take it to Hulu or Netflix, it's a commercial project. So it's interesting that there is a window of opportunity where people can, you know, theoretically use any song they want and pay almost nothing and not have to wait for the songs to actually be approved by the rights holders and broadcast that as a finished product. But a lot of people either don't know or don't take advantage of that opportunity. Now, the other thing about PBS is because it's nonprofit, you know, there's not going to be a lot of money that's made. So a lot of PBS projects are publicly funded, you know, by grant money in different institutions. So it is just a different method, but it does kind of fall under the category of, well, what free music, or, you know, how can I get cheap music? It's like, well, by and large, you can't do it, but there are certain restrictions or certain parameters that if you follow, the music guidelines for licensing are a little less heavy than if you're licensing music for a commercial production. So when you're licensing music for a commercial production, then this is when this infographic comes up, the music licensing process. So there are certain requirements that a production is going to have, which is the input. And that input, when it is sent to different rights holders, the people who own the rights and will be giving permission and quotes for the song, when they receive that information, they'll be able to process it to give you a permission or to negotiate a fee. And once that fee is negotiated and the permission is granted, then there's the process of actually licensing and invoicing and paying for the license itself. So when people say, well, just license a song, it's like, well, okay, how do you license a song? There are always two licenses that you need. You always need a master use license from the record label or whoever owns the actual recording of the song. And then you will always need a synchronization license from the writer or the publisher of the song. And that might be multiple people. It might be multiple publishers. So knowing that you have to get those two licenses for each song that you want to license for a film, then what you'll actually do is start to get your media requirements together. You'll want to clarify your usage. Are you using it as a background use? Are you using it as a featured use? Is somebody singing it or somebody dancing to it? You'll want to address the term of the license. Most likely you'll want to license something in perpetuity so that it lives as long as the life of your film and travels along with your film as well. Now, in terms of term, perpetuity is, that's the grand package. You can negotiate a lower fee sometimes if you negotiate for less of a term. If you want to negotiate a 10-year term or a 5-year term. I usually don't suggest negotiating short-term licenses because if the film changes hands or goes to a distributor, how are they going to know that they're going to have to renew certain music licenses at a certain point in time? Or if you are upfront with them about that, is that something that they're actually going to want to undertake? So it becomes a consideration in that regard. What markets? And this is generally territory. So, the big package is you want it to be worldwide. But, specifically for PBS projects, PBS is public broadcasting that relates to the United States. PBS is not a worldwide license. So if you're licensing a song for a film or a television show and you want that song, that piece of content to be on a Hulu or a Netflix, they stream to people worldwide. So you are going to want to have a worldwide license to broadcast the song that you are licensing in any country. Now, generally, it breaks down to 50% of the world is represented by the US in terms of revenue and territory. And then the rest of the world is 50%. So you'll find some songs that are administered by one company in the US and it's administered by another company outside the US. So that's part of the research that goes into identifying rights holders and how many people you're going to need to get permission from. The media, what media are you going to be asking for? You're going to be asking for theatrical. Are you going to be asking for limited theatrical or art house theatrical? Will you be asking for television and or streaming rights? Will you be asking for promotional rights? That will be in your music licensing ask as well. So you need to know yourself where you anticipate the content going so that you're prepared to know that you can ask for the appropriate rights. Product or exclusivity, this is something that goes in because maybe you want to use a song and you don't want anybody else to use the song. And if that's the case, then it just needs to be considered and probably factored in that it might actually come at a higher cost, depending on what the position of the artist and or the song is. And then you have different options that you can include, and your options might extend your media use. So maybe you're just doing streaming platforms, but then you learn that there's an educational circuit that wants to air your documentary. So that might be an extended media use. You might ask for an option for educational use. You might ask for an option for art house theatrical or for film festivals even. Each of those different media outlets is a different right that the rights owner has the ability to charge for. So as clear and upfront as you can be, primarily to know what you want, then you can have a more productive conversation to really identify how much it's going to cost to cover your needs. Extended markets. You know, maybe something is made for PBS and it initially airs on PBS, but all of a sudden you have distributors around the world who want to show it. Then that might be an option where, you know, initially it's airing on PBS, but then you want to have the option for it to stream worldwide or to play theatrical or in film festivals. These are all questions that a producer and production can ask itself, so it can be better prepared when talking to a music supervisor or a music licensing agent so that they can get you what you need. Calculating offers. This is really important, and this is what I call strategy. And the strategy is being very realistic about how many songs you anticipate needing to license and how much is your music budget. You know, if you've got 20 songs and your music budget's $100,000, it's like, well, that seems like you're looking for $5,000 songs. It's like, well, I need this one, you know, $40,000 song. It's like, all right, so you want one $40,000 song and $19,000 song? Like, you know, it's like, how are you going to reconcile that budget? But however you do it, it needs to be done. And it's not a matter of, oh, well, we'll hire a music supervisor and they'll just take care of it. Like, well, I'm here to maximize on the available resources. And for me, in order to do that, I need to have all of this information from production. And it's amazing. If you don't have this information, then you're not ready to license music. You can have a creative discussion. You can talk to people about songs you like, but it's just not the same as actually being prepared to license a song. So those are the things that production needs to have ready in order to get a song licensed. And once we have all of that information available, then we go to putting all of that information to use, and that is to negotiating the commercial terms. So the first part is identifying the rights owners. Now, as we talked about, we have a label or master recording owner, and they will need to sign off and provide a license. And we also have a publisher or multiple publishers that are attached to the songwriters of a song. Now, identifying rights owners can be easy, but it can also be very difficult. Many songs and songwriters are registered with ASCAP and BMI, which are the US's performing rights societies, and their websites do a good job of indexing songs, so you can actually find out the publishers of certain songs. But that information is not always 100% clear. But once again, you need the right input in order to find the song. If you say, oh, I know this song and I want to use it and it sounds like this, ba 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 ba, like that's not enough information for a music supervisor to go on. You need a song title. You need an artist. You know, it would be helpful if you have a year that it was released. You know, just so a music supervisor can then start doing the detective work to find out, well, when was it released and what record label released it? Most likely that is the owner of the master rights. If I go to and Google that song and Google who was it written by, is there somebody who's going to come up? Am I going to be able to identify that song and those writers on the ASCAP or BMI publishing sites to find out how to contact them either directly or if their song is administered by a larger publisher? So that has to happen for every song. You know, in its very simplest form, there's one artist who, you know, has ukulele and they record their songs and they license them themselves. They write all their own music. They own their own master. They write their own songs. They own their own publishing. In the industry, that's known as one stop. And one stop is good because one stop means that you can talk to one person and you can get the full rights to a song. Because the master is usually owned by a record label and songwriters are usually, you know, on their own somewhere else, many times the two sides don't speak and they're not really connected. But when you license a song for film or TV or commercials, you have to connect both sides. So after you identify the rights holders, then that's kind of your approval party chain. Like, all right, the song Love and Happiness was written by Al Green, but am I calling Al Green at home and asking him, hey, Al, can I use this song? No, if you go to the ASCAP site and you type in Love and Happiness performed by Al Green, you'll come up with, I think it's high-low music, and you'll see that it's administered by, I believe it's Wixen Music. So, oh, Wixen Music is a publisher. Wixen Music has a website. Wixen Music has an email address and a phone number, where I can actually send a request for the song. So being able to identify that chain of title and who actually signs off is really important. This also comes into play when people say, oh, well, my parents live across the street from his mother. And, oh, I saw him at a party and, the artist said that I could use their song. Or, yeah, she hit me up on Instagram and said that she loved my film, so I could use anything I want. It's like, well, that's all fine and well, but generally the artist isn't the sole rights owner of a song. The classic example is I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston. So Whitney was signed to Arista at the time. So if you wanted to license that song, you would get a master use license from Arista. And then if you wanted to license the publishing for the song, you would look to who wrote the song. Dolly Parton wrote the song. So you're licensing the publishing from Dolly Parton in Golden Apple Publishing. So where is Whitney in that?
Nowhere.
Well, hopefully she has, a good deal from her record label and gets a little something from that. But you see that she doesn't own the rights to that song. She doesn't own the master recording with her voice.
You said key word, a performer. She's a performer.
She is a performer, exactly. So that's, that's a blatant example. And sure, she wrote a lot of other songs. So, having a cover song that does that well on an artist album, you can put whatever other songs you want that you wrote on the album, and it's going to make a lot of money. So just an example of, researching labels and publishers and what the approval party chain is. So, someone's grandmother, somebody's neighbor isn't in the usual approval party chain, unless it's like Missy Elliott, whose mom approves everything for her.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I do have a question to something you mentioned earlier. You mentioned, you may get one type of license if you look to distribute in the United States, but then if you do want to go internationally, you would end up getting a worldwide license. Is that something you can do in steps? Like, can you start your film with one license and then expand that license to be what you need for the next step if you end up getting a larger distribution deal?
It's all up to you, and that's why it pays in this whole media requirement, that left-hand category. That's all on you. That is all information that no one else can answer but a producer and a director for a project. So is the plan, it's like we're only doing US and US festivals for now, and then we're going to build a buzz, then we'll do a distribution deal for something larger. Then you would communicate that to your music supervisor and say that's the plan. So the initial rights we need are for the US only. But then we want to have an option so that we can expand to something further. Now, it's good to have that plan, but with media distribution the way it is right now, Netflix and Hulu is worldwide. It's like, it's like you're either on or you're off. So are you streaming on some platform that's only in the US? So, you have to also ask yourself the real questions. It's like, where do we see this being, when we're done? And
right.
So worldwide's usually pretty common.
Pretty common, okay. And so that leads me to another question. What you covered is a lot of the business and the legal aspects, where some people may not even realize that that's as much for, especially if you're a new filmmaker, that's what a music supervisor does. You mentioned a lot of research, understanding all the agreements and terms, and being able to negotiate and so forth. What about the creative side of the music supervisor and what you do? I know I mentioned like some of the movies that you've been a music supervisor for, I just absolutely love, but like Roll Bounce, for example, is one that sticks out to me. My mother used to roller skate, and watching that film, it would bring me right into the roller skating rink with her, with the classic songs and then like the jazzy fey music that was current at the time. Right. How do you work as a creative, mind when it comes to film as a music supervisor?
On a film like Roll Bounce, because there's music written into the film, in essence, it's a dance battle movie, but it's a dance battle movie on roller skates. So what we needed to take into account was the period, and the region and what was being listened to, you know, at that time, you know, what was popular. And then not only what was popular, but the film opens up where the rink on the south side closes, the south side of Chicago closes. So they have to go up to the north side to skate. And, you know, it's different up there. You know, it's a different crowd. It's not an all black crowd. You know, it's like, it's a bigger skating rink. It's got a different hierarchy and it's got a different sound. So how do we like actually acknowledge that in the script stage and then start to prepare different categories for the kinds of different music we'll need? Is it by venue, like the skating rink, or is it by a character? You know, there's a character in the film named Sweetness, played by Wesley Jonathan. And this is the most amazing story that Malcolm Lee ever told me. So Wesley Jonathan, you know, he came in for the audition and he had never roller skated before.
Wow.
So if you watch that movie and you see like he's Sweetness, he's the king of the ring. Like, you know, he's the guy who beats Bow Wow like for the final, like at the end of the movie. He had never skated before. So it's just one of those things where I was just completely blown away by, you know, how an actor can transform themselves and become somebody. But even down to Sweetness, because the presence was so prominent in the script, Sweetness had to have his own theme music. You know, so it was Johnny Guitar Watson, you know, Superman Lover. That was Sweetness's theme music, and we had that locked down probably before we started shooting, because you want to have that identified and cleared. So in that scene on that day when Sweetness steps out on the floor, you can actually have that music playing as playback. You can have him skating to it. You can have him reacting to it, as opposed to if you don't identify it. You know, you can have him come out, you can have him skate, and then post-production, you can place a song. But there's something about being able to, if you're not identifying the song, identifying the tempo even, so that people can move to the rhythm.
Right,
So
right. And I was going to say, sometimes I've heard, and you could tell me, you know, it's about, like you just said, getting a song that might be the tempo of the song that you look to license, you know, so that at least they could still have the same reaction and flow. So people do that, you know, often. Is that something that people will do?
I actually encourage people not to shoot to a particular song so that you can have more flexibility in post. Because if you shoot to like a certain part of the song, is that the part that all of a sudden the editor has to cut the entire scene to? So being able to give as much flexibility in post is great. And what the technical term is, or not, it's called a thumper track. And what a thumper track is it's basically a kick drum. It's a bass note. It's 80 hertz. And a frequency that low, once you bring it into a Pro Tools or an audio processing station, it's an easy tone to phase out. So if you play it on set, you can have people all bounce into the same tempo. But once you get into post-production, you can take it out. And then you have blank sound. And as long as you have a song that matches that tempo, you know, it's going to fit one way or the other. And then that's when you start to boil it down towards, well, is it aggressive? Is it slow? Is it sexy? Is it, you know, leading to something? Does it build to something? And, you know, that's where tempo is just one factor. And then the more relevant information you have and descriptive information about that scene, then the better chance you can do and the music supervisor can do in helping you make it fit.
Okay. Okay. So that's like a trick that, you know, could help people if you don't want to, if you're not sure if you could even license a song that you want, but like you said, it does create more flexibility. So we talked a lot about the business, the negotiating, the process of researching up front. We just now covered some things in terms of the creativity and understanding the script and the character and the tone that you're trying to create. Is there anything else that you want to share with us as a music supervisor before we open it up for the audience to ask a few questions?
Well, the one thing I will mention is that after pre-production and after production, once we're in post-production, the first step and a really crucial step for the music supervisor is the spotting session. And the spotting session is wherein the director, the producer, the editor, and the supervisor, and the composer, if they're on at that time, all come together and watch the project scene by scene. And I take notes. You know, it's basically a spreadsheet, scene by scene. Does this scene need music? If yes, what kind of music does it need? Does it need a song or does it need score? Does it need some sort of instrumental or thematic music for the environment or the character that's going to help to drive the narrative? And after you go through an entire project, you'll have a really good idea of how many songs you need and also how much score you need. So if you don't have a composer, that's a really good way to try and communicate how much music you may need. You know, what are you going to need from the composer? Do you need somebody who does a specific kind of music because you find you have like 8 different cues that all relate to this specific kind of music? If that's the case, then you need to hone in on somebody who can deliver that need. For Who Killed Malcolm X, you know, it was a modest budget and tremendous project, but it didn't have the money to support licensing a number of commercial songs. So after discussing with the directors, we decided to reallocate, you know, money that was in the licensing budget and give more money to the composer. And why was that? Well, we needed a composer not only that could do score, but we needed them to also do kind of credible period music to a certain extent as well, because we're going through a number of different channels. And we also wanted something score-like, but we wanted something modern, you know, and just something kind of updated. So it became important to us that the composer we chose could actually produce credible sounding music, you know, in addition to score. And that was why being able to work with Prince Paul and Don Newkirk was amazing, because, you know, their track record of producing incredible pop music is great, and hip hop. And, you know, it's like to have them be able to focus their skills to something that is oriented for a documentary series was just great, because you got to see them kind of use muscles that they've developed for years and years, but they've never been able to really apply them to this particular medium. And I only knew that they were doing scores because I was listening to the Chris Lighty story, the podcast that they did with Gimlet, and at the end it's like score by Prince Paul and Don Newkirk. And I was like, that sounded great. You know, let's see if we can bring them in for something else. So the composer becomes a very important part of, you know, the musical balance of the sonic landscape, because the scene's either going to have no music or sound effects, you know, and dialogue, or it's going to have a song, or it's going to have score. So the sooner we're able to identify how much of each we need and what we need for each of them, then that's when we can really start to get to work.
I have one question also about just your thoughts about soundtracks. Do you think those will ever kind of come back the way they used to be around in the 90s and early 2000s?
Well, it's interesting because, you know, before, as I was saying, I was in college and getting my new releases direct from the record labels. You know, I didn't know how else to do it aside from going to a record store. We didn't have a lot of those in New Hampshire. So, you know, soundtracks were a way for people to put together compilations of music and attach them to a vehicle that was going to be cross-promoted. You know, it's like films cross-promoted music, music cross-promoted film. It was all good. But now we're in an age where all of the content is available all the time. So unless you have a project like Black Panther, where, you know, Dave Jordan, who does, you know, the Marvel film, he knows what he's doing. He had a pass of that film that was not with Top Dog and Kanye. Like, you know, they were making the film, and then he was able to show it to them. And he got a response. It's like, we want to do it. We're going to do stuff. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do that. So all of a sudden, what became apparent was, oh, we're going to have original songs that aren't attached to anything else, and they don't appear on any streaming platforms. So if you've got the resources to be able to create all original music, and then to be able to have a film come out to cross-promote that music, that is the formula for a soundtrack. But right now, if the music from your project is available on streaming platforms, then make a playlist. Your playlist is your soundtrack, but it's not, you know, people going to buy it necessarily. And, you know, for me, I'm of two minds about it. Like, I'm glad because there's more stuff available, but I kind of miss the fact that artists had an additional revenue stream, you know, from not just having the royalties that they get paid when the song plays, you know, on theater screens outside of the country or on television, but they could also collect money.
Right. And that's I didn't think about it that way, of like how you said it's so accessible for the music, and that's why soundtracks are just not as useful as they used to be. Casey just said from Ghetto Film School that we do have a question from one of our participants. So Casey, if you can bring in that question or let us know what the question is.
Yes, indeed. Let's see if there's anything else that was left out. One other thing that I wanted to mention is the term most favored nations. It's something that comes up in terms of music licensing a fair amount. And the reason is because every rights owner has the right to quote whatever they want to quote for a song. So you can have somebody quote $100 and somebody quote $100,000. You know, nobody can say they're wrong, it's their property. So most favored nations is a strategy. It's not always to be used, it doesn't fit every situation, but what you're doing when you set up most favored nations as a producer is you're setting up a strategy that says, we've got 20 songs and we've got $100,000. Every song's getting $5,000. We will offer every song $5,000 on a most favored nations basis, which means that no song is going to get more than $5,000. So right. This record label and this publisher who are used to getting $20,000, you know, you can say, well, here are the 20 songs we're using and everybody's getting the same amount. And that's why we can't afford to pay you more. Now, the blessing and the curse of the most favored nations is as a producer, you have to be ruthlessly clear about what you're willing to keep and what you're willing to lose. Because if something doesn't adhere to the $5,000, or they're like, we'll do it, but for $6,000. That $1,000 increase also goes across the board to all the rest of your songs. And not just on the master side, but also on the publishing side. So a $1,000 increase from one song in a group of 20 is a $20,000 increase. So that's kind of the thing to watch out for, but the benefit of it is if you are able to present a case, it's like, look, we made a film for $200,000, we set aside $100,000 for music and every song is getting the same amount and it's a good cause. You may be able to build a case, you know, where you can convince people to allow you to use the song for that much. But as I was saying kind of in the beginning, you know, it's film first, it's picture first. If a rights holder isn't getting back to you in the amount of time that you need to be able to make sure that you have everything you need to get your film to the finalization stage, then you have to be very honest with yourself about cutting it and getting a replacement, or being very aware that you're taking the risk on mixing a song in that's not cleared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and would you say that you work closely with the legal department on a film also, or who do you as a music supervisor, if anyone is interested in becoming a music supervisor? I know on the creative side you work with, you know, the directors, the composers and so forth, but on the business side, who do you work with on the project?
On the business side, it is business affairs departments. So on a show like The Chi was produced by Fox, but it's distributed by Showtime. So the music delivery that I was doing after doing the spotting session, after identifying the songs, after negotiating the fees for the songs, I would get the confirmations and have the invoices sent to Fox Business Affairs. Mm-hmm. So generally there's going to be a production attorney that each project is working with. My very first contact with a production attorney in a project is to say, hey, do you have documents or templates that you want me to use for your project? Or do you want me to, you know, suggest one? Because I have them, sometimes they have them, but the important thing about that, especially that it come from production, is that the production attorney know, you know, just what we were saying before, just like in the media preparation, it's like, what are your needs? You know, where do you expect this film to go? So I know what rights that we need to ask for. And that's information I'll ask the director and producer, but yes, I'll always ask if there's a production attorney or somebody who already has documents they want used, or if they want me to use documents that'll be created for the project.
Okay. Well, this was definitely, for me, a great, you know, learning experience to go even dig deeper into the business side. I'm very familiar with the creative process on a film, but understanding really all of that you do on the business side. Again, I want to throw it out there to see if anyone else has any questions. If not, we could, you know, wrap up the session with any last comments that you may have.
You know, it's film. There are no rules. So as long as you can adhere to certain guidelines to protect yourself, to make sure you're not putting your film in jeopardy, music can be an incredible, you know, supplement. You know, I always think that the best value is received from music that's created originally to be tailor fit for a project. You know, it's like you can go with the grain or against the grain, or you can pull out a song that hasn't been used in a long time, and that can always have a certain amount of weight. But when you lock in to the tone of your film and you have a composer that speaks that language, your project can be filled with music. And the best part about score, some people say that the best kind of score, you don't even hear it. And it's because score really is kind of a musical glue to help hold the narrative together. It's not necessarily always meant to be heard. But if you watch a film with music and then watch the film without music, it's going to seem 30% longer.
Right. And it's going to just, it just completely changes everything when you take music out. I've been in edit sessions where I was just like, okay, I don't know if this is going to work. And then you drop a song in there just to see if it can help bring the film alive. And it completely changes the film. You know, so music is extremely important on how well your film is going to be received. Yeah, so I want to take a picture real quick on my phone. So if you could just look into the camera and we'll take a quick picture with the audience, everybody that's there. Let me see who's on, anybody that, oh, okay, I see Leon, I see David, JM, and a few other people. So let's go ahead. I'm going to take a quick picture. And 1, 2, 3. Oh wait, I clicked it up one more time. I messed that up. All right, and 1, 2, 3. All right, perfect, perfect. So again, everybody, thank you for joining us with the Ghetto Film School, presented by AT&T and Warner Media. We appreciate these master classes and everything that we can learn. Mr. Barry Cole, thank you for everything you've done for film, especially Black film, and what you have done for the music in a lot of the classic films that I absolutely love myself. This is it. We can sign off here. And what were you were saying? Any last comment there?
Oh, just thank you to you, Kia. It was a great conversation. Thanks to Ghetto Film School.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your evening and this weekend. Take care.